The abandoned space station loomed ahead, its dark silhouette barely visible against the backdrop of distant stars. Inside the Earth research vessel Pioneer, James Miller adjusted his protective suit while staring at the station's damaged hull through the observation window. All scans indicate the station is safe for exploration, but remain alert. Captain Roberts' voice crackled through the comm system. Remember, this is just a standard salvage mission. James nodded, double-checking his equipment. As the ship's xenobiologist, he had explored countless derelict stations, but something about this one felt different. The damage patterns on its exterior didn't match any known weapon signatures or natural phenomena. The airlock hissed as James and two security officers, Mike and Tom, stepped into the station. Their helmet lights cut through the darkness, revealing corridors filled with floating debris. The artificial gravity had failed long ago, making their movements slow and deliberate. "Look at these claw marks," James said, running his gloved hand along deep gouges in the metal wall. Whatever did this was huge. Mike tightened his grip on his pulse rifle. "Let's just grab the data cores and get out of here. This place gives me the creeps." They made their way to the station's central computer room, following the emergency lighting that still flickered weakly. James focused on collecting biological samples, while the security team worked on extracting the main computer's memory banks. A sudden movement caught James's attention. Something large shifted in the shadows beyond their light's reach. His heart raced as he recalled the reports of the galaxy's apex predator, the Stalkers. Every spacefaring species feared them, but no one had ever managed to study one up close. Those who encountered them rarely survived to tell the tale. "Movement at 2 o'clock, Tom whispered, raising his weapon. Before anyone could react, a massive shape launched itself through the zero-gravity environment. In the beam of their lights, James caught glimpses of obsidian scales, multiple limbs, and bioluminescent patches that pulsed with an eerie blue glow. "Stalker, open fire," Mike shouted, his pulse rifle lighting up the darkness. But James remained frozen, his scientific mind racing. The creature's movements weren't random or purely aggressive. Its bioluminescent patterns changed in what appeared to be specific sequences. More importantly, it was favoring one of its limbs, moving in a way that suggested injury. "Wait," James called out, but his voice was drowned by weapons fire. The stalker disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind a trail of glowing blue droplets. It's blood. The security team was already calling for immediate evacuation, but James couldn't tear his eyes away from the blood droplets. They were emitting patterns of light that seemed almost deliberate. "We need to leave now." Mike grabbed James's arm, but he pulled away. "It's injured and trying to communicate," James insisted, his xenobiologist's instincts screaming that this was a crucial moment of discovery. "Look at the bioluminescent patterns. They're too ordered to be random. Have you lost your mind? That thing has killed entire crews." James made a decision that would change his life forever. While his teammates retreated, he stayed behind, shielded by a fallen piece of station equipment. He pulled out his research tablet and began recording the light patterns. The stalker emerged again, its massive form gracefully navigating the zero-gravity environment. Instead of attacking, it hovered at a distance, its bioluminescent patches pulsing in what James now recognized as distinct patterns. He noticed how it positioned itself to appear less threatening, keeping its injured limb hidden from view. "You're not just a mindless killer, are you?" James whispered, fascinated by the intelligence he saw in the creature's multiple eyes. His comm unit erupted with urgent calls from the Pioneer, ordering immediate evacuation. But James had spent his career searching for new forms of life, dreaming of a discovery that could change humanity's understanding of the universe. Here, in this abandoned station, he had found something extraordinary. A member of the galaxy's most feared species, showing signs of sophisticated communication and reasoning. As the security team's footsteps faded away, James made a choice that went against every protocol and survival instinct. He stayed, determined to understand this mysterious creature. In that moment, he didn't realize he was about to challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about the Stalkers and about humanity's role in the greater cosmic community. The emergency alarms on the Pioneer blared as Captain Roberts' voice thundered through James's comm unit. "Miller, this is a direct order. Return to the ship immediately." James watched as the Stalker maintained its distance, its bioluminescent patterns continuing in what he now recognized as repeated sequences. The creature's multiple eyes tracked his movements, but its posture remained defensive rather than aggressive. "Captain, I need more time," James replied, his heart racing, but his voice steady. "This could be the scientific breakthrough of the century. The Stalker is trying to communicate." "Have you lost your mind? Those things have destroyed entire colonies." James muted his comm unit, focusing instead on the injured creature before him. The Stalker's wound was more visible now, a deep gash that leaked luminescent blood. Something about the injury pattern suggested it came from a trap or mechanical device rather than combat. Drawing on years of xenobiological training, James slowly reached for his medical kit. The Stalker's biolights flashed rapidly, but it didn't retreat. He noticed how its patterns changed when he moved, almost like it was reading his body language. "I want to help," James said softly, knowing the creature couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone would convey his intent. He held up the medical kit, moving with deliberate slowness. The Stalker's multiple eyes blinked in sequence, and its bioluminescent patches pulsed in a new pattern. James quickly recorded the sequence on his tablet, noting how the lights seemed to mirror his own calm movements. A sudden bang echoed through the station as the security team returned, this time with heavy weapons. "Step away from it, Miller." Mike's voice echoed through the corridor. The Stalker's posture instantly changed, its biolights flaring defensively. James made a split-second decision. He pushed off from his position, floating between the security team and the creature. "If you shoot, you'll have to go through me first," James called out, spreading his arms. "This isn't what we think it is. Look, really look. It's injured and scared. It hasn't made a single aggressive move." Tom's weapon wavered. "James, you're talking about the deadliest species known to the galaxy." "Known, but not understood," James countered. "We've never tried to communicate. We've never tried to understand. We just assumed they were monsters because they looked different." The Stalker, instead of taking advantage of the distraction to attack, moved closer to James in what appeared to be a protective stance. Its biolights pulsed in a soothing pattern that James had begun to associate with non-aggressive intent. Captain Roberts' voice cut through the tension. "Security team, stand down but maintain position. Miller, you have 5 minutes to prove you're not completely insane." James worked quickly, his trained eyes noting how the Stalker's wounds seemed to be causing it significant pain. He pulled out a universal biological scanner from his kit, showing it to the creature first. "I'm going to help you," he said, making his movements slow and predictable. The scanner's readings confirmed his suspicions. The Stalker's biology was far more complex than anyone had imagined, with neural patterns suggesting high intelligence. To everyone's amazement, the creature extended its injured limb toward James, the bioluminescent patterns around the wound dimming slightly. It was a clear sign of trust that left even the security team speechless. James applied a universal healing gel to the wound, careful to avoid causing additional pain. The Stalker's biolights pulsed in what seemed like relief as the medicine took effect. "Captain," James spoke into his comm, "I'm sending you scanner data now. This isn't just a predator. The neural complexity suggests intelligence possibly exceeding our own. We're making first actual contact with a species we've misunderstood for generations." As if to confirm his words, the Stalker began creating complex light patterns that matched mathematical sequences, prime numbers, Fibonacci series, and other universal constants. James's tablet recorded everything, providing undeniable evidence of sophisticated intelligence. The security team lowered their weapons, their fear giving way to wonder. In that moment, years of prejudice and fear began to crack, all because one human chose to look past appearances and break protocol. After hours of observation and careful interaction, James sat cross-legged in the now secured section of the space station. The Pioneer's crew had reluctantly agreed to let him continue his research, though they maintained a heavy security presence at all access points. The Stalker, which had remained close to James, created intricate patterns of light that danced across its scaled body. James's tablet recorded every sequence, its advanced software beginning to identify recurring patterns that might represent basic concepts. "There's got to be a way to bridge this communication gap," James muttered, reviewing the data. He noticed how the creature's subsonic vibrations changed with each light pattern, creating what seemed like a complex language system. Using the station's partially functioning systems, James rigged a makeshift translator that could detect and replicate both the bioluminescent patterns and subsonic frequencies. It was crude, but it was a start. The Stalker watched with obvious interest as James worked, its multiple eyes tracking every movement. When James activated the device, producing his first attempt at copying one of the creature's light patterns, the response was immediate. The Stalker's biolights pulsed rapidly, and it moved closer to examine the device. James held his breath as the creature extended one of its limbs toward the translator, delicately adjusting its position with surprising precision. "You understand technology," James said, amazement clear in his voice. "You're not just intelligent, you're scientifically advanced." Through trial and error, and with the Stalker's apparent guidance, James began to grasp basic elements of their communication. The light patterns weren't just random signals, they were a sophisticated language combining visual, audio, and subsonic elements. "Miller," Captain Roberts' voice came through the comm. "Status report." "Captain, this is incredible," James responded, his excitement evident. "The Stalker species has a complex language system. They don't just communicate, they have a way to express abstract concepts." As if demonstrating this point, the Stalker began creating a series of patterns that James's translator partially decoded. The first clear concept they managed to exchange was a name. The Stalker identified itself as Swift. "Swift," James repeated, using the translator to create the corresponding light pattern. The Stalker, Swift, responded with a pattern that the software interpreted as agreement or confirmation. Over the next few hours, James and Swift developed a rudimentary way to share basic ideas. Through careful observation and Swift's patient corrections, James learned that different combinations of lights and frequencies could express complex thoughts. "Look at this," James spoke into his comm, sending data to the ship. "Swift is trying to tell us something about their species' history. These patterns keep repeating when we discuss other alien races." The translation was rough, but the message was becoming clear. Swift's people weren't the mindless predators everyone believed them to be. They were scholars, explorers, and scientists who had been misunderstood and feared because of their appearance. James watched in fascination as Swift used the zero-gravity environment to create three-dimensional light patterns, telling a story through movement and illumination. The translator struggled to keep up, but the meaning was increasingly clear. They've been trying to communicate with other species for generations, James explained to the watching security team. But everyone reacts with fear and violence before communication can be established. Swift's biolights dimmed momentarily, a pattern James had begun to associate with sadness or regret. The creature then created a new sequence, one that showed two different beings working together. "I think," James said slowly, "Swift is trying to tell us that they've been waiting for someone to simply listen." The security team exchanged glances. Even they could see that this creature, despite its fearsome appearance, was far from the monster they'd believed it to be. Tom even lowered his weapon completely, watching with undisguised curiosity as James and Swift continued their exchange. Using the translator, James managed to convey a simple but powerful message. "Friend, Swift's response was a beautiful display of synchronized lights and subtle vibrations that filled the room with a sense of hope and possibility. In that moment, James realized he wasn't just breaking down language barriers. He was helping to shatter centuries of fear and misunderstanding between species. As the makeshift translator improved with Swift's help, James uncovered a history that shook the foundations of galactic knowledge. They sat in what had once been the station's observation deck, the stars providing a backdrop to their revelation. "Play that sequence again," James said, adjusting the translator settings. Swift's biolights pulsed in a complex pattern, telling a story that was both beautiful and tragic. Through the translated light patterns and frequencies, James learned that the Stalkers, who called themselves the Luminary, had once been peaceful explorers. Their massive ships had crossed the galaxy, seeking knowledge and understanding of the universe's mysteries. "Your people were scientists?" James asked through the translator. Swift's confirmation came with a burst of bright patterns that the device interpreted as enthusiasm. The creature moved gracefully in the zero-gravity environment, using its bioluminescence to create a visual representation of ancient luminary research vessels. Swift revealed how the first contact with other species had gone horribly wrong. The luminaries' appearance, their size, their multiple limbs, their alien features, had triggered immediate fear and hostile responses. Swift created patterns showing peaceful luminary approaches being met with weapons fire and aggression. "But why didn't you try to communicate then, like we're doing now?" James asked. The answer came in a series of dimmed patterns that spoke of sorrow. The luminary had tried, but their attempts at peaceful contact were always met with violence. Over generations, they were forced to become defensive, to fight back when attacked, earning them the fearsome reputation that now haunted them. "Captain," James called over his comm, "you need to see this data. The Stalkers, the Luminary, they were never the monsters we thought they were. We made them into monsters." Swift moved closer to the observation window, its biolights reflecting off the transparent barrier. Through the translator, it shared images of vast libraries and research centers hidden in deep space, where luminary scholars still preserve their species' dedication to knowledge. "You're not just any luminary, are you, Swift?" James asked, noting the complex scientific patterns the creature often used. "You're a researcher, like me." Swift's confirmation came with an elaborate light show explaining its mission. It had been studying the very station they were on, investigating its abandoned technology, when it was caught in a defensive trap that caused its injury. James watched in amazement as Swift demonstrated its understanding of complex scientific principles through light patterns. The creature sketched equations in bioluminescence, describing theories about spacetime that even humans hadn't fully grasped. "All this time," James muttered, "we've been shooting at beings who could have taught us so much." The security team, who had been watching from a safe distance, moved closer as Swift displayed more of its knowledge. Even they couldn't deny the intelligence and peaceful intent now obvious in the creature's actions. Through the translator, Swift revealed another shocking truth. The Luminary had discovered numerous scientific breakthroughs that could benefit all species, but fear and prejudice had prevented them from sharing these discoveries. "We need to show this to the Galactic Council," James said, his voice firm with conviction. "The truth needs to come out." Swift's biolights pulsed in a pattern that suggested hope, but also caution. The translator conveyed a warning. Many powerful entities benefited from keeping the Luminary isolated and feared. They wouldn't want this truth revealed. James stood up, facing Swift directly. "I promise you, your people's true nature will be known. We'll make them understand." The creature's response was a complex pattern that spoke of gratitude and trust, but also of concern for James's safety. It knew better than most how the galaxy treated those who challenged its accepted truths. As James recorded more of Swift's revelations, he realized that uncovering the truth was only the beginning. The real challenge would be getting the rest of the galaxy to accept it. The following days brought remarkable changes to the abandoned space station. With Captain Robert's reluctant permission, James had converted the main research lab into a shared workspace where he and Swift could study each other's cultures. "These light patterns represent your art?" James asked, watching in wonder as Swift created intricate, three-dimensional light sculptures in the zero-gravity environment. The translator had evolved significantly, allowing for more nuanced communication. Swift's biolights pulsed in confirmation as it wove complex patterns that told stories of luminary history. The creature had begun teaching James about their artistic traditions, where light, movement, and subsonic frequencies combined to create what could only be described as living art. "This is beautiful," James breathed, recording the display. "How could anyone think your people were just mindless predators?" Through their improved communication, Swift shared more about luminary culture. They were a species that valued knowledge above all else, with each individual specializing in different fields of study. Swift's particular expertise was in xenobiology. Ironically, the same as James. "You studied other species too?" James asked, fascinated, even while they were hunting you. Swift's response was a complex pattern that the translator interpreted as both confirmation and sadness. The luminary had continued their scientific pursuits, even while being forced into isolation, hoping that one day they would find someone willing to listen. James noticed how the security team, initially tense and watchful, had gradually relaxed around Swift. Tom had even started learning basic luminary light patterns, though his attempts often made Swift's biolights pulse, in what James now recognized as their version of laughter. "Look at this," James called out, as Swift demonstrated luminary mathematics. The creature created light patterns that described advanced theoretical concepts, some of which went beyond current human understanding. "Miller," Captain Roberts' voice came through the comm. "The crew is talking. Some are saying we should invite Swift aboard the Pioneer." James glanced at Swift, who had dimmed its lights in a show of careful consideration. "What do you think?" he asked the creature. "Would you be comfortable coming aboard?" Swift's response was cautiously positive, but its patterns conveyed concern about frightening the crew. James had learned that the luminary were deeply conscious of how their appearance affected others. "We'll do it gradually," James decided. "Let the crew get used to the idea first." Over the next few hours, James shared videos and images of Swift's peaceful interactions with the Pioneer's crew. He showed them the art, the scientific exchanges, the clear signs of intelligence and culture that proved the luminary were far more than the galaxy's story suggested. Swift, meanwhile, created a beautiful light display that the translator revealed was a traditional luminary greeting ceremony. The pattern spoke of peace, respect, and the sharing of knowledge, core values of their civilization that had been hidden behind years of fear and misunderstanding. "Your people never lost hope," James said softly, watching the lights dance. "All these years, being hunted and feared, and you still believed someone would eventually understand." Swift's biolights pulsed warmly, creating patterns that spoke of patience and determination. Through the translator, it explained that the luminary had a saying: "Knowledge bridges all gaps, even those carved by fear." As they worked together, James noticed subtle changes in how Swift moved and communicated. The creature had become more expressive, more willing to share personal thoughts and feelings. It was as if years of defensive behavior were slowly melting away, revealing the true nature of its species. "We're making history here," James told Swift, as they prepared another demonstration for the crew. "One day, people will look back and realize this was the moment everything changed." Swift's response was a pattern so complex and beautiful that the translator struggled to capture its full meaning. But James understood the essence. It was a message of hope, of friendship, and of a future where understanding would replace fear. The warning came without notice. A massive Galactic Council warship dropped out of hyperspace, its weapons systems already powered up and targeting the station. "All personnel, this is Captain Robert." The announcement echoed through the station. "We have a Priority 1 alert. The GCS enforcer is demanding immediate evacuation of the station. They're here for the stalker. James looked at Swift, whose biolights had dimmed to a nervous flicker. The translator conveyed the creature's fear, not for itself, but for what this could mean for future human-luminary relations. Xenobiologist Miller, a stern voice crackled through the comm system. This is Admiral West of the Galactic Council. You are harboring a Class A threat species. Clear the station immediately for cleansing procedures. James's hands clenched into fists. Swift isn't a threat. We have proof that everything we thought about the luminary was wrong. Just let me show you the data. This is not a negotiation. The Admiral cut him off. That creature belongs to a species responsible for countless deaths. We have authorization to use lethal force if necessary. Through the observation window, James could see more Council ships emerging from hyperspace. Swift's patterns became urgent, the translator revealing its plea for James to save himself, to leave while he could. No, James said firmly, both to Swift and to the Admiral. I won't let them do this. He activated the station's main communication system, broadcasting on all frequencies. Admiral West, I am invoking Article 7 of the Galactic Rights Charter, the right to present evidence of sentient species misclassification. A tense silence followed. The article was rarely used, but was binding. Even the Council couldn't ignore it without violating their own laws. You have 10 minutes to present your case, Admiral West finally responded, his tone icy. After that, we proceed with cleansing. James worked frantically with Swift, preparing their evidence. The creature's biolights pulsed with determination as they transmitted data about luminary culture, science, and art. They showed recordings of Swift's peaceful interactions with the Pioneer's crew, the complex mathematical and scientific exchanges, the artistic demonstrations. More importantly, James added, I can prove the luminary were peaceful explorers before we forced them into defensive isolation. Swift is a scientist, just like me. Their species has knowledge that could advance our understanding of the universe by centuries. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. On the main screen, they could see the Council ships maintaining their attack positions. Final warning, Miller, Admiral West announced. Clear the station. James made his decision. He moved to stand between the Council ships and Swift, his voice steady as he broadcast his response. If you want to destroy an innocent being, you'll have to go through me first. And then you'll have to explain to every species in the galaxy why the Council murdered a human scientist to keep the truth hidden. The silence that followed was deafening. James could feel his heart pounding as he waited, knowing his next words could mean the difference between war and peace. Think about what this means, he continued. We have a chance to right a centuries-old wrong, to turn enemies into allies, to gain knowledge that could benefit every species in the galaxy. Or you can prove that we're exactly what the luminary feared, beings who destroy what they don't understand. Swift moved forward, its biolights creating a pattern that the translator revealed as a formal request for peace talks. The creature's dignity in the face of threat was unmistakable. Admiral, James said softly, you have a choice. Make the right one. The weapons lock signals from the Council ships wavered. On the main screen, Admiral West's expression showed the first signs of uncertainty. James held his breath, knowing that the next few moments would determine not just Swift's fate, but the future of human-luminary relations. The galaxy was about to change. The only question was how. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as James and Swift entered together. Hundreds of representatives from different species watched with a mixture of fear and fascination as the human and luminary approached the central platform. Xenobiologist James Miller, the council leader, spoke. You stand before us to challenge generations of established policy regarding the stalker species. Present your evidence. James activated the advanced translator they had perfected over the past weeks. Swift's biolights began to pulse, creating patterns that filled the chamber with living light. The translator converted the display into words all species could understand. Honor Council, Swift's translated voice resonated through the chamber. I am Scholar Swift of the Luminary Science Academy. We come seeking peace and the sharing of knowledge. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the assembly. Many had never heard a luminary speak, let alone demonstrate such eloquence. James stepped forward, his voice clear and confident. For centuries, we let fear blind us to the truth, he began. The luminary were never the monsters we made them out to be. They were explorers, scientists, artists, forced into isolation by our prejudice. The chamber screens came alive with evidence. Swift teaching human crew members advanced physics, creating complex artistic displays, sharing medical knowledge that could save countless lives across species. The recordings showed peaceful interactions, intellectual exchanges, and moments of genuine friendship between the supposed predator and its human companions. But most importantly, James continued, I present the historical records Swift helped us recover. The screens showed ancient footage of the first tragic encounters, where peaceful luminary approaches were met with weapons fire. The assembly watched in stunned silence as centuries of misunderstanding unfolded before them. A council member stood. If what you say is true, why did they not try to communicate before? Swift's biolights created a pattern of profound sadness. Through the translator, it explained how every attempt at peaceful contact had ended in violence, how the luminary were forced to defend themselves, and how that defense only reinforced the galaxy's fear of them. We never stopped hoping, Swift's translated voice said. We never stopped believing that someday, someone would look past our appearance and see us for who we are. James watched as understanding began to dawn on the council members' faces. The evidence was undeniable. Years of prejudice were crumbling before the simple truth of Swift's presence and words. The luminary have offered to share their scientific knowledge, James announced. Advances in medicine, space travel, energy production, knowledge they've gathered over centuries of isolation. All they ask in return is acceptance and peace. The council leader raised a hand for silence as debate erupted in the chamber. And you, James Miller, you vouch for their peaceful intentions with your life. I do more than that, James replied firmly. I vouch for their friendship. Swift and its people have shown more wisdom and forgiveness than we ever deserved. They offer us a chance to right our wrongs and move forward together. Swift moved forward, its biolights creating the most complex pattern James had ever seen. The translator conveyed its message. Let this day mark not an ending of fear, but a beginning of understanding. Let us build bridges where once we built walls. The chamber erupted in discussion, but James could see in the council members' faces that the tide had turned. The truth, once revealed, could not be ignored. As the council prepared to vote on new policies regarding luminary relations, James turned to Swift. The creature's biolights pulsed in a pattern he had come to recognize as joy. We did it, James said softly. Swift's response created a shimmer of light that needed no translation. It was the universal language of hope, of friendship, of a future where understanding triumphed over fear. In that moment, as human and luminary stood together before the galaxy's leaders, James realized that the greatest predator was never the luminary. It was prejudice itself, and like any predator, it could be defeated with enough courage, wisdom, and the willingness to see beyond the surface. The end.